there's tens of thousands of sprayers, right? There's something like between 25,000 and 50,000 sprayers currently in circulation. We're only on, a little bit more than 3 dozen sprayers right now. So we have by no means tackled massive adoption. Now we've come farther than anyone else has in a quicker period of time, right? So we got to 1 million acres in 3 years. Um, Even for stuff taking 8 years to get there, right? For to 1 million acres.
So, welcome to this week's episode of Leaders Are on a Mission, and today we're going to be really diving into the world of precision agriculture and I suppose innovation. Up to check this out, right? Up to 50% of pesticides that are sprayed on crops never reach their target, and just looking at that and understanding the billions that are wasted and the harm to the environment just seems like a perfect opportunity for innovation. And a company called AgZen are on a mission to change that. And today I'm joined by founder and CEO Vishnu Jayaprakash. Now, AgZen, they spun out of MIT and they're really all around reinventing how crops are treated. So during this chat, we're going to dive into, I suppose, how precision delivery can transform agricultural sustainability, and just the journey and the challenges of scaling a kind of deep tech in farming and what it takes to bring an innovation like this from lab to field. So, Vishnu, thanks so much for coming on today. I know you're out there in the field today, right? Just, and appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Simon. Yeah, I'm in Nebraska today for one of our last installs of the season, but yeah, really excited to have this chat with you.
All right, no, awesome. Maybe just talk through a little bit about. I'm curious, right? What were, I suppose, some of that key experience or insights that led to you kind of co-founding AgZen, as it were?
It's been quite a remarkable journey so far. We spun out the company 3 years ago, but the project and sort of my involvement in it goes back even further. So just to back up all the way, my experience with farming sort of started when I was about 6 or 7 years old. My family has a 11-acre farm in southern India, and we'd spend the summers there. And my mom was very deliberate in getting her sons involved in farming. So we used to go in the summers and get involved in farm. We go rice, mangoes, and coconuts. And one of the jobs on the farm, kind of the worst job on the farm, was to spray the mango trees. So I used to have a backpack sprayer along with my brother and get on a ladder and spray the trees. And at that point, we both decided we were going to have nothing to do with farming because it was awful, right? All of the spray would get back onto you. And it was it was the worst. Fast forward about a decade and a half, I get to MIT for graduate school. And I want to work on something that will have a positive impact in people's lives. So I just didn't want to do a bunch of papers. So I found a lab that was working on these really important problems. It's called the Varanasi lab at MIT. And they had already been working on optimizing spraying for about 4 years before I joined the lab. So they had a grant from the USDA. And they were working on, how do we make spraying more efficient? It's this fundamentally inefficient process, like you said. And when I saw that project, I was like, I know what that is. That's a real problem. I've had to deal with it.
You were taken back. You were taken back, right?
Yeah, I was taken back. And it's funny. My parents still give me grief to this day of, you said you didn't want anything to do with farming. And now here you are running an agricultural tech company. So yeah, it's funny how life goes around. But yeah, I spent a good amount of time. I spent 6.5 years getting my master's and PhD working on really understanding the fundamentals behind spraying and application and how crops are grown. And, I had exposure to specialty crops and a little bit of rice, but really learning about all the different crop systems and how inputs play such a vital role. And we actually ended up coming up with something really neat We went to, my work is in, I specialize in interfacial science and fluid mechanics. So that was what my PhD was in. So we came up with this really, really cool nozzle. It made droplets stick better to plants. One of the, as we went through this journey of discovering what was wrong with input application or what could be made better, we found that, hey, look, a lot of what we spray doesn't get to the plant, like you said earlier. And of the stuff that gets there, not a lot of it stays on the plant because you're fundamentally spraying water onto a water repellent thing. Um, and so we said, hey, what if we could make these droplets stick better to plants? And so we came up with this nozzle. It does some very interesting things with the droplet itself. But long story short, without changing anything about the chemistry of what a farmer sprays, it makes droplets stick 2 to 3 times better to the plant. And we were really excited about this. We went to farmers and said, hey, look, we have this thing. It prevents droplets from bouncing off of your plant. So a lot of what you spray will stay on the plant. That means you could spray less to get the same amount to be on the plant. And we thought this was a no-brainer, right? We went to farmers and we said, hey, look, this is going to be great. You're gonna love it. And every farmer that we talked to said the same thing, which is this looks cool, but we have no idea how much of what we spray is actually on the plant. So how do we know you're making anything better? Or how do we know how much to cut the rate? And that was a light bulb going off moment where we're like, oh my God, this is a much bigger and even more prevalent problem of people just having to spray blind. And we dove deeper into that, and we started thinking about that in every field. What is that process like? And we learned that it's not just the farmers that didn't know what was on the plant. It's the people who make the chemicals. It's the people who make sprayers. It's the regulators who are supposed to keep track of this. It's the insurance providers who are supposed to cover crops. No one in the entire chain of infrastructure knew how much product was getting on the plant. And that was the true light bulb. And that was 3 years ago. So we said, oh my God, we need to solve this problem. This is, you mentioned some numbers earlier. So I want to provide some context, right? Just in the US, farmers are spending about $16 billion on chemicals. 16 billion, right? So every acre of corn or soybeans that gets sprayed, there's 180 million acres of both of these things. Call it 200 to be even. Right. So there's about 200 million acres of corn, soybeans, and cotton. Every acre that a farmer sprays, they're making 1 billion droplets over that acre. But no one knows where these billion droplets are going, how many of these billion droplets on every acre, every time they spray, are actually getting to the weeds or getting to the crop they're trying to spray. And the entire company, when we found out this problem from our farmers, we said, hey, look, the mission of our company is going to be to optimize input application at the lowest level possible, be it at the droplet level or the granule level, and actually remove this blindfold, right? Actually tell people how many of these billion droplets are actually getting on the plant, and then see how we can make that process more efficient. And it's been remarkable seeing the uptake of that journey, because the cool thing is this is not a problem that farmers don't know about. It's something they've been craving for an answer for such a long time. And we finally come along and we're answering it. That's why we've been able to grow so quickly. So after that first epiphany, we've had a series of epiphanies. I think every startup is about a series of epiphanies. But just to contextualize it, 3 years ago, we founded the company. This year, we're on 1 million acres of row crops, optimizing spraying. And all of that's commercial with farmers leasing or owning our products. So hopefully that gives you, I know you asked about some interesting milestones in the journey, but hopefully that gives you some context.
Absolutely. Just give us a little bit of education around this then. Thank you for the figures, but I read quite a lot around, over the years you've seen this innovation in kind of technology and precision spraying, for instance, right? Where I thought there were companies, whether it be like, the Blue River and Green Eye Tech and Eco Robotics, I think it was, who have developed a company, I suppose, for, being able to be much more
Yeah.
selective around kind of sensing where to spray, as it were. So just kind
Yeah.
of run through where your solution kind of fits alongside that, as it were.
No, yeah, that's happy to do that. So, like you mentioned, it's been pretty obvious to everyone involved in farming that input application is one of the most inefficient steps, right? And that has led to the last about decade and a half of a series of companies trying to attack this problem, right? So some of the names that you mentioned. Um, but it came from the fact of, okay, like, how about we look at this problem from the aspect of, hey, let's not spray where we don't need to spray, right? That's been the fundamental approach of all of the companies that you mentioned, actually, um, which is to say, hey, look, if there's let me back up a little bit more. Let me actually tell you how spraying is done conventionally, and then I'll
Yeah,
tell you where these companies fit and where we fit in, right?
yeah.
So conventionally, spraying is this incredibly complicated process, right? You're trying to get these chemicals, you mix it in water, and you're spraying these billions of droplets, and you're hoping to get them on the plant, right? But there's so many factors that influence that. Imagine a sprayer driving through a field. It's what nozzle are you using? How fast are you driving the sprayer? How high above the crop is the nozzle that's spraying onto the crop? What's the wind speed at that time? What is the weather like? How much moisture does the plant have? What's the chemical that you're actually spraying? All of these factors influence not just how much of your product gets on the plant, but then how well it works, right? So it's this really complicated process. And we've been spraying at an industrial scale since World War II. So that's about 80 years, right? And for 80 years, this entire process of finding out all of these optimums for all of these really complicated physical, chemical, and environmental things was all done blind, right? So you just went out, you picked a set of parameters that maybe worked for you last year or worked, based off of Ag University studies on a different field. And you went out and you tried those parameters, right? And you would learn at the end of every season. And maybe you make adjustments, maybe not, but it was a very, very blind process of finding these optimizations. And this, as you can imagine, leads to a lot of inefficiency, right? So that's the status quo. So then over the last decade and a half, there's been this host of companies that have said, hey, this is a really inefficient process. What if we could only spray where you needed it, right? So that was the approach. So Blue River pioneered this route. I've chatted with Jorge a few times. He's actually been to our office. Um, and their approach was to say, hey, look, if there's a weed there, we're going to turn the nozzle on. And if there's not a weed there, we're going to turn the nozzle off. Fantastic approach, right? So you don't need to spray where you don't have it. That's awesome to get rid of, areas where the spray is not needed. However, it's not really telling you anything about how much got on the plant, how you can optimize the rest of these parameters, how you could, all of these complexities I talked about of, hey,
Mm.
what's the right nozzle to use for this spray? Where do you
Hmm.
actually put your boom so that the spray gets on the plant? What's the right adjuvant you should use? What's the right, chemical mix for that particular spray? What's the right wind window that you should actually be spraying it? It's not helping you with any of that. It's just telling you, hey, I'm a sprayer. I'm going to turn the nozzle on and off based off of when I see something, right? So we decided to tackle this problem from a different way and build the world's first feedback controller for spraying, right? So um, we closed the loop by saying, hey, let's not look at the stuff before we spray it. Let's actually look at it after we sprayed it to see how well we did and see what led to that level of product on the plant, right? So we wanted to link inputs to outcomes. And we were the first company to do that. We still are the only company that does that. And that has been incredibly powerful. So closing the loop on application has been sort of this thing that growers have been craving for a long time. And you know what's funny? It's actually been done in other aspects of farming. So precision planting led
Mm.
this revolution in planting technology, where they were the first company to close the loop on planting, right? So they said, hey, like, we're going to actually measure where and how well every seed has been planted. And we're not just going to do it blind. We're going to actually measure it, and then we're going to feedback loop into the planter. And that led to it's been a sea change over the last 2 decades of how farmers plant their crop. And when you look at spraying, that sort of same revolution hadn't happened. And we're just at the frontier of that, where we said, hey, look, now we know, thanks to our company, AgZen, we built this product called Real Coverage. It's measuring and controlling how many droplets are on every leaf for the very first time as the farmer is driving. And so now you're able to make all of these decisions that I talked about, all of these complexities I talked about, using real data rather than waiting till the end of the season. You change one thing, you see how much more or less got on the plant in real time. And that has led to a tremendous efficiency gain for growers, to the point where they're able to save 30 to 50% on their chemicals. But the cool thing is that's kind of only one of the ways that you can you can have our unit give you returns. Perhaps the other big distinguishing feature between what we've done and every other type of precision spray technology is, up until now, the only way to make precision spraying pay for itself is you spray less, right? So like I talked about, the approach has been, hey, don't spray where you don't need to. So that means you're cutting out on stuff, so you're saving on chemicals, right? But in our case, you are actually controlling the amount of droplets on the leaf, right? And that's where the savings or the improvement comes from. So let me give you this droplet picture to tell you all the gains that are possible with our system, right? So I told you every acre you spray, you're spraying 1 billion droplets. That's a really hard number to wrap your head around. So how about I simplify it, right?
Yeah.
So every time you go out, let's say you spray 100 droplets, right? 100 droplets is what you're spraying. And because of the wind carrying away droplets, because of droplets bouncing off of the plant, let's say you end up with 20 droplets on the plant. How crazy would it be if I told you in the 80 years of spraying, no one has ever measured how many droplets are on the plant? Isn't that crazy? This is the main way that we protect our crop. This is the main way that all crops are grown, which is that you spray stuff to protect them. And by the way, if you didn't spray it, you would lose 50% of the yield to some sort of pest or disease. So farmers have to spray, right? And we've been doing it. And no one has ever measured, hey, you spray 100, how many get on the plant, right? So immediately you see where AgZen value comes in, because we're the only company in the world that tells you, hey, you sprayed 100 and you actually got 20 droplets per leaf as you were going. Now that's really, really valuable knowledge, right? But we don't stop there. We then say, hey, while you're spraying 100, you used to get 20. What are things you could do so that while you're spraying 100, you get 40 now on your plants? Now, that means more is getting on the plant, more is getting on the weeds. Let's call it a herbicide, right? So you're trying to get this product on the weed. And now more is getting on the weed, and you're able to kill that weed more effectively, right? So now you're getting better yields as a result of killing weeds better. You're getting better disease control of getting more insecticide on the plant or fungicide on the plant, and you're getting better disease control. So now farmers are earning that right to spray less, right? So they sprayed 100 before, they got 20 on the plant before. Now with our optimizations, they're spraying 100 and now they're getting 40 on the plant. Well, they've had, 2 decades, every farmer, right? They have 40 years to get it right, but call it, they've been spraying for 2 decades and they're happy with the level of weed control. They get 20 droplets per leaf. Now you don't need to spray 100 anymore to get 20, because I just showed you and our product just showed you, hey, you spray 100, now you're getting 40. Now you could spray 50 and still get 20 on the plant.
Right.
Okay. And so that's a very unique way to generate efficiency, because we're saying, look, we're going to make you earn the right to spray less. You're not just going to get to spray less right away. You're going to get better first, and then you're going to cut down. And so that's where our product allows you to save money in multiple ways, either by getting better outcomes on the field or by saving money on the chemicals. And that's been part of the reason for the very quick uptake as well, because it's based on this very common sense approach where you're never compromising on what's on the plant, but you're getting savings anyway.
Absolutely. No, I love it. And so just I'm fascinated. The nozzle. I mean, is it a straightforward nozzle? I mean, Jeff, we don't need to go into the technical
Yeah.
kind of dissertation you ended up writing, but to give me a sense. It seems quite simple for something so complex.
Yeah, I think that's the goal of any product that makes it to mass market, right? Is to make it look very, very simple, but it's doing a lot underneath the surface. Just for context, it took 6.5 years of my life to come up with this nozzle, so that should tell you that it's not something that happens overnight. But what it does is something fairly simple, right? So farmers have been using these compounds called adjuvants. So these are things like surfactants, crop oils, things of that nature. Their primary function, especially for the surfactant side of things, is to get the droplet to stick to the plant better, right? Their whole goal is you're spraying a water-based spray onto a water repellent plant. Let's add this chemical to make sure that the droplet doesn't bounce off, right? Great concept. The problem is these surfactants need some time so the droplet impact happens. So let's imagine a droplet's going, hitting a leaf, it pancakes out, it then retracts and then bounces off of the leaf. Now, I described that process very elegantly and very slowly. That happens in about 10 to 20 milliseconds, right? So very, very quickly is how quick that droplet bouncing happens. The challenge is these chemicals have to work in that really tiny window, right? They have to make it to the interface between the droplet and the leaf from inside the droplet, and they have to arrest this droplet from bouncing off. And that's just time that this droplet doesn't have, right? It's happening so quickly. But we studied this fundamentally. We've had a look at, hey, why are, farmers are using these chemicals? Why are they failing? Why are they not working all the time? And we found that, the main issue is that these molecules don't have enough time to act because they have to make it from the inside of the droplet to the outside as this droplet's pancaking. And we said, well, what if we shortcutted that? What if we already put all of this chemical on the outside? What if we made a nozzle that took these chemicals that farmers are already using and put them all on the outside? And that way, it's already there, right? So when it's pancaking and going out, it doesn't have to go from the inside to the outside. It's already there. Turns out we tried that, and all the droplets ended up sticking way better because now the time is no longer a factor because those molecules are already there. The challenge, however, is these are all miscible fluids. So the thing that you're putting in to make these droplets stick better, it mixes really easily with the water because it's supposed to. It's like soap. It mixes really well with water, right? So the challenge was, how do you keep these droplets stable as they, these new droplets, we call them cloaked droplets. So we cloak these droplets in the chemical rather than mixing them in the tank. How do you generate them? How do you make 90% of your droplets be cloaked? And then how do you keep them stable until they get to the plant? That was what took 6.5 years to figure out. But at the end of it, what you have is some proprietary nozzles that we make, but it just goes into any sprayer that you have on the market, and it makes your droplets stick way better, right? And what's cool is now we're not running into the same problem we ran into 3 years ago, which is farmers then come and tell us, well, I have no idea how much you're improving it. Well, we have another product we came out with first, Real Coverage, that now quantifies exactly how much product is on every leaf. So now you could see the benefit of using our nozzle in real time. So that's how it works in a very quick nutshell.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So tell me about commercialization, right? Getting onto, it's a very fragmented, complex value chain. You're a small company, right, with this innovation, right? The biggest challenge, getting it onto market and growth. So how do you get to almost a million acres within a couple of years or 3 years? Talk through what your plan has been with that.
Yeah, we, because the initial concept for Real Coverage, this idea of actually being able to measure and control the amount of products on every leaf, that came from the customer, right? So we didn't go with that. And we said, hey, we have something else. And then the customers told us, hey, look, like this is great, but we need this other thing. So we had a good sense of, okay, this is something that farmers want, but we didn't just base it on anecdotal farmer evidence. We then did a lot of work to figure out. We talked to ag universities, we talked to chemical companies, we talked to spray manufacturing, the OEMs. And we figured out, yeah, this is a real problem. And we wanted to go about it in the right way where we said, look, we're going to prove this out. And that proof is then going to help us scale, right? So the first couple of years, we didn't sell anything. So we just spent the time doing trial work and pilots, right? So we worked with 3 ag universities, Cornell, Texas A&M, and UMass Amherst. We worked with fantastic extension folks there to do rigorous trial work, right? Where we said, hey, look, let's figure out the answers to two very fundamental questions. Does the amount of product on the plant matter? And does it matter more than how many droplets you spray in a field, right? Does it matter more that you're actually getting more on the plant or not? And the obvious answer was backed up by all the rigorous agronomy that we did, which is that, yeah, the amount of product on the plant matters a lot. If you can control that, you can control the outcome. And if you control that, it doesn't really matter how much you spray per acre, because what's doing the job is the number of microliters on every leaf, right? So we unlock that with 2 years of rigorous work. So we did, like I said, academic trials. We then did 12 pilots and trials with commercial folks. So we were in farms in Iowa, we were in farms in California, over in Europe, in Venice, and in France. And the goal was to just build this data set and really learn for ourselves as well to see whether, hey, does this approach make sense? And once we had that data set from the first couple of years, our first step was commercially was 2024. And we leased out, or customers either bought or leased 7 of our units, and we were on 65,000 acres the first year, right, of row crop, which is already a massive step for pretty much any ag tech company. To go from 0 to 65,000 paid commercial acres is a massive step in 1 year. But the reason those guys went with us, those farmers, those early adopters went with us, is because, like I said, it's something that they've thought about since they started farming, right? It's something that every ag university has told them about since the beginning of, like, hey, your coverage, which is what they call the amount of product on the plant, coverage is king, is an adage in farming. That's a known adage,
Right.
but no one bothered measuring what coverage is or how much you need or any of that stuff. And so that's where we were able to grow. And then what we did last year is really what set the stage for this year, because as a new product, getting out there and working and bringing value to farmers in your first year is an incredibly hard challenge. But what we were able to show is that for pretty much all of our customers, we showed them how to first double the coverage while spraying the same amount per acre. So get 2 times the amount of droplets per leaf using our tool. And then we help them cut that rate so that they're saving money too, without compromising on the amount of product. And that took a lot of work, right? First year, ironing out a lot of kinks, sort of working with them hand in hand. But we got there in the end, and they all saw value. And the proof in them seeing value was built into our business model, because we said, look, you're going to own the unit, right? You're not going to pay us a per acre fee or anything like that, because we learned from other products that came out before us about what farmers like and what they don't. We could dive into that later if it's interesting, but we learned about that. And farmers said, hey, look, we want to own stuff. So we said, great, you're going to own it, but you're going to pay it off over time, just like a car lease, right? So you're going to lease it and then you're going to own it. And at the end of that season, we made it very intentional. We said, hey, look, you're going to have an opportunity to leave at the end of the first year. What that's going to do is actually make you make a decision as to whether or not we are doing anything for you. And it's also going to be really useful for us, because if our customers don't renew, that means we're not making a product that's worth having. But all of them renewed and all of them came back. And we were like, okay, this is now something that has value. And sort of the testimonial from farmers was what, really triggered our exponential growth this year, because then they started talking to their neighbors. And my favorite story is in the Wabash region in Indiana. We had 3 customers last year, and they just went and talked to their neighbors. And now we have 16 customers in that 10 county region, just through word of mouth. I joke about this with people. So until October of last year, we were a 5-person company, and we were selling all of these products to farmers across the US. But the growth really came from farmer word of mouth, where they were just saying, hey, look, there's now finally a product to help you pick the right adjuvant, help you pick the right nozzle, help you actually know what the right way to spray is. And then farmers started saying, hey, look, we'd like it and stuff like that. And so that's been sort of our way to grow. But along that, we said, hey, look, like we're now, getting to 1 million acres in just customer orders. There's no way a company based in Boston is going to be able to service all of these people
With
because
5 people.
technology, yeah, with five
Something.
people, right? So it's not going to be, yeah, no, it's exactly right. And this is a big learning curve for a lot of ag tech folks, and I think companies more recently have learned this a lot, and we've also been benefited from the pioneers that came before us to sort of learn about this. But the product is one side of it, but then service and distribution and support is almost an equally important second side of it, right? Because if a farmer gets this product and they have a problem and it takes you 4 days to get there to fix the problem, that's it. They're going to throw your product out, right? Because they need to spray that day because there might be a rainstorm coming tomorrow. And so we then said, hey, how do the big players sell equipment? They don't have one office and then they're, supporting all these pieces of equipment from that one office. They work with dealerships, right? And so that was our trigger to say, hey, okay, let's go out and get dealerships. Let's, build this company out with the infrastructure that folks already have tested and built, right? Why are we innovating on something that we know works? So we went out and got 5 dealerships all across the US. And now those dealers are the first call for our customers, right? So our customers, if anything goes wrong, they call the dealer. Dealer responds within 24 hours, they're back up and running. And that has been a vitally important process to sort of learn and go with as we've grown from these 0 acres 2 years ago to 1 million acres now, is not just learning on how to improve the product, but improve the entire experience around it. So that's been a really cool journey to be a part of, honestly.
Yeah, no, great. It's really interesting. Like when you think about ag tech companies and scale and growth, normally the challenge is, you've got this wicked bit of technology and then adoption is the challenge. You always hear about farmer adoption and farmer being burnt by tech and, being like really reluctant to change things. I don't, for you to go from 3 customers, to something like 16 in that region through word of mouth, that's like the opposite kind of challenge in itself, right?
No,
amazing.
it's wild. I mean, I'll give you an anecdote. So we had a customer turn his unit on last week, actually, in that Indiana region. And he said the exact same thing you said, which is, hey, look, man, I've been burned before. Ag tech and ag machinery always gets oversold. And, I've tried 50 things and none of it's worked. But your thing, you turn it on and it's working right away and it's working the first day and it's doing what you said it would do. And I think it's because, and he's starting to talk about other farmers about it, right, already. And I think it's because of 2 factors. One, we're going after this challenge that we don't have to introduce anyone to. The moment I say, hey, look, we're measuring and controlling droplets, everyone's like, sign me up, right? Because they've known that this is a problem. It's not like, hey, I need to educate you that, hey, this is a problem and therefore you need to care about it. It's a problem that's been front and center of their mind every time they get into that sprayer and close the door. And they've never had a way to do it. So another one of my customers, funnily enough, when I first talked to him about it, he's like, this is like bean counting droplets on leaves. Like, why has no one ever done this before? And I was like, yeah, we're doing a few more complicated things than that, but you're right. You're right. Why has no one done that before? Right. And that was, that's the number one sort of, I think, sort of reason we've grown to the level we've grown. But let me put this into context still. There's tens of thousands of sprayers, right? There's something like between 25,000 and 50,000 sprayers currently in circulation. We're only on, a little bit more than 3 dozen sprayers right now. So we have by no means tackled massive adoption. Now we've come farther than anyone else has in a quicker period of time, right? So we got to 1 million acres in 3 years, even for stuff taking 8 years to get there, right? To 1 million acres. So it's this sort of obviousness of solving this problem that's led to us getting adopted so quickly and getting to 1 million acres in 3 years. So that, has already been an exhilarating part of it. But the other part of it is we didn't set ourselves too high of a benchmark, right? So we made some very intentional choices product wise to say, hey, look, we are a statistical tool. We are measuring a lot of leaves. We're measuring tens of thousands of leaves to tell you stuff. But if we had set the goal of, hey, we're going to measure how much product is on literally every leaf, we would have fallen short of that every time because that's a really hard thing to do. There's millions of leaves. But we said, okay, what is the amount of information you need to actually get insights out of it? And that's what those first 2 years were really useful for us, to really set product benchmarks that could change behavior, that could help people get better, but not set unrealistic targets for ourselves for what our product needs to do, right? And so that allowed us to build a product that works the first time you turn it on. It's working right away and not struggling to do something that's even more impossible than what it already is. And the other intentional part of our product was to make it a retrofit that is separate, right? People, a lot of folks want to integrate right away. And we want to integrate too. So our mission is to get to sprayer autopilot at the end of the day in about 3 years' time, where a farmer gets in, all they have to do is just get in and drive that sprayer. And the sprayer is going to take care of everything. And AgZen systems are going to control everything about that sprayer, right? That's our end goal. But we didn't want to get there right away. We said, hey, look, we're going to spend the first few years getting all of this stuff figured out. Why should we stop? We should never be stopping a farmer from doing what they want, right? So we said, okay, we're going to build this tool. It's going to give them unprecedented insight, but it's going to be a standalone retrofit for the first couple of years. And the idea was, okay, if our thing goes down, shut it off. You've already learned so much from our system. Give our dealer 24 hours to come back, but it's never going to stop you from spraying. It's never going to stop a farmer from doing their job. Where I think that's been, once you bake yourselves, as a startup, I feel like if you make yourself the end all be all for something a farmer needs to do, that's a very quick recipe for disaster. Because then, look, if you go down, that's something they're not doing on their farm. That could be the difference between that farm making money or going bankrupt, right? And so what we said is, hey, look, we're going to give you unprecedented insight that's going to help you get better. And if at any point we go down for whatever reason, let's say you drive our camera into a post and you break it off, no worries. You just turn it off. You've learned a lot of stuff. You apply those, and then we'll get it back up and running. We'll put a new camera on, and you're good to go right away. So I think both of those things combined with how much of a no-brainer problem we're solving is why we've been growing as much as we have. But that next step between where we are now with a little over 36 customers to getting to those 10,000 sprayers, 50,000 sprayers, that's really been where, we've actually have two sides to our business, where we have a farmer focused side where we're saying, hey, look, we're going to sell you products. It's all going to pay for itself within a year. You're going to get tremendous benefits out of it. We're going to remove these blindfolds, and you're going to start applying chemicals a lot more efficiently and making them do more for you. But like I said in the beginning, no one really knows, what was going on with input application, and no one knew how many droplets of herbicide are on the weeds. No one even really knows, hey, for this year, for this generation of weed, how many droplets of this chemical do I need on this type of weed to kill it versus on this other type of weed to kill that one effectively, right? And that's incredibly valuable information that we're getting now on 1 million acres, right? Where every time a farmer's going out, we're getting that information. And that's where we built this second side of our business we call Real Performance, where we're bringing along everyone involved in ag inputs, right? The chemical companies, the OEMs, the nozzle manufacturers, all of them want to work with us, and we want to work with them because ultimately we want to give the farmer a better product. And by working with these folks, we're learning things about the chemistry, we're learning things about agronomy, we're learning things about sprayers that's helping everyone get better. And that's been, that's where also this step between 3 dozen units and 10,000 units is going to come from, is working with the industry and bringing them along on this, sort of new journey and this new path that we're paving right now.
Yeah, no, I love it. And what are the challenges with that, though, with bringing everyone on board? Because, you think about some of the large chemical kind of manufacturers here, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's sometimes a challenge, right? They've got their customers, and how do you do that? How do you bring everyone along?
It's funny. At the outset, it looks like, hey, here's a product that potentially farmers could use to spray less. So would chemical companies be happy with that? But we've been talking with all the major chemical companies, the generic manufacturers, and we're forging relationships with them. And what we found is, look, what they really care about is selling outcomes to farmers, right? They want farmers to be happy with their product. That is paramount importance to everything. And sort of our difference in approach has also led to a difference in attitude, right? Because we haven't said, hey, the only way that our product works is to cut the amount that you spray, right? That's been the approach of precision ag when it comes to spraying until we came along, where we said, hey, look, first off, we're going to make you get better. And then if there's room, we'll cut you down and you'll save money, but you're always going to get the optimal result. And that's where us and the chemical company have the same goal, which is both the chemical companies, the manufacturers, and us. We want our farmers to have the best result from spraying every time. And so we're actually very aligned on those goals. And also, all the chemical companies, look, they also want their product on the plant. That's where it does the job. They don't want it, if it's not a plant-based product, they don't want it in the soil either. So we're all super aligned on how to get there. And that's what's led to actually a lot of excitement from the chemical world of saying, hey, let's work with this company. Let's actually answer these deep fundamental questions. Let's answer questions that are related to our commercial business. Let's answer questions that are, posed by regulatory agencies, because now we have a way to optimize the outcome for the farmer, right? We're always getting the best possible outcome, and we're spraying correctly, and we're spraying the right amount, and we're learning at a exponential rate. And it turns out, when you offer learning to everyone to help them accomplish their goal, then you get partners all over the place, right? You don't get friction, you start to get excitement. And that was a big learning for us as well as a company, and for me as a founder, is to say, hey, look, this is a product. At the outset, it may seem like we're doing this, but actually what we're doing is helping everyone get better. And everyone sees that right away too, which is cool. That's been really cool to see. And there's really, really smart people at all of these companies that have been working towards this. And they also, want to get on this journey. And so it's actually been really awesome to see how quickly we've been able to go really far with chemical companies and OEMs and things of that nature.
It's such a clever, it's been such a wonderful discussion to have you come on and talk about this kind of innovation and about how you're bringing this value chain together and solving such a problem which has existed for so long. Just tell me, final thing, tell me a bit more about your ambitions over the next kind of decade, as it were, right?
Yeah.
What do they look like for you?
Yeah. Look, we think we've come up with something really, really important for input application. And when we're starting with spraying and we're getting into fertilizer application too, and that's another product we call Real Nutrition. So we have a couple of customers trying it out this year, and that's going to disrupt how fertilizers are applied in the field using the same concept, building a feedback loop for fertilizer application. And our goal is to get this, it's not just to scale the business in terms of the number of farms using our equipment. Our goal is to get the entire industry using feedback optimization. So that's the fundamental goal of saying, hey, look, whenever a designer at an OEM is coming up with a new sprayer, they are going to want to have our tool to say, how does my tweak in this part of my sprayer affect the amount of product on the plant? Or whenever a chemical company is coming up with a new chemical, we want to be integrated in day one of their development process till year 14 when they're launching it, to say, hey, this is the amount of product that's on the plant, right? We want to get integrated with retailers to say, hey, look, if I'm spraying for a farmer, I want that farmer to know that we're doing the best job possible on their farm, right? And this is all the really interesting thing is all of these things are paths that have been followed by other products in ag. So, like I talked about, precision planting went from being this startup to being that approach of closing the feedback loop on planting is now across every farm. Like there's huge adoption for that, and that's where we want to go too. Is that feedback optimization is a necessary step, not just for farmers, but for input manufacturers, for OEMs, for seed companies, for everybody. And we want to see that there, and that's where we're building towards essentially.
Awesome. I get a sense you wake up every day excited.
Yeah, man, it's been quite a journey. I get really fueled by tackling difficult challenges and coming up with sort of interesting ways to solve them. And we're learning every day, right? I think the thing I'm addicted to most is just learning. And things are going to go good and things are going to go bad. So I feel like just detach myself from sort of outcomes, but the learning is like what drives me every day and drives, everyone on our team. We built a fantastic team and they work really, really hard. But I think even more important than them working really hard is just how passionate they are about learning and serving customers and learning alongside them. Right. And so that's just like the thing that fuels all of us, I think.
Yeah, but also for you as someone that's developed the technology over a long period of time, it's really clear your appreciation and closeness to your customer and the farmer, and understanding the history of the journey, as it relates to some of the kind of challenges that they have to deal with, and how they looked and viewed innovation previously, right? So all that is clearly filtering into how you're approaching it, and it's been a real education. I think the listeners are going to love this story, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing.
I appreciate it, Simon. Thank you so much for having me. This has been great for me as well to talk to you. I know we've been sort of circling around setting this up, but really appreciate the time and the opportunity to come on. I'm an avid listener myself, so looking forward to it.
No, awesome. And so, like to all the guests, all my listeners, look, it's been a great discussion. So, hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the show next time.